Good morning, everybody. It's Jeff Goldberg for the Sales Pro Network. If you have not joined us before, I'm a sales coach and trainer, and I work with both individuals and organizations internationally to help them do one thing and one thing only, increase their sales. And I founded the Sales Pro Network about 4 or 5 years ago now to elevate the profession of sales, to give a place for our salespeople to hang out, network with each other, learn from each other. And if you've been with us before, you know that every Friday at 10 a.m., I either do a live training or a live interview with somebody who can add value to the profession of sales. And once again, my friends, I've come through for you. Today's guest, it's an interesting thing because one of her main things is storytelling, as you're going to see today. And her story really resonates, so much so that when we were recently introduced for networking purposes, about 10 minutes into the conversation, I said, hey, I think I know you. And I'm pretty sure I caught a vibe of, who's this old geezer trying to pick me up? But it turns out we actually did know each other, because when she was talking about herself, I recognized her story immediately, because our guest today, who I'm going to introduce in 2 seconds, and I actually participated in something called Speak, which is kind of like TED Talks, except at a TED Talk, you've got 8 or 10 or 12 speakers all speaking on different subjects. And at a Speak subject, everybody speaks on the same subject. And we both did a talk on laughter. She's an award-winning comedian. She's a speaker and a consultant with a thing for synthesizing ideas through storytelling. She uses her experience and her signature, which I can't wait to find out about, comedian's formula, to help people be the go-to expert in their industry. Please welcome, and Jen, I hope I don't mispronounce your last name. Please welcome Jean Lederer. Is it Lederer or Lederer?
You nailed it. You nailed it.
Woohoo! Well, welcome, Jen. It's good to see you, and I'm glad we're speaking today, and I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say. Before we do that, could you maybe give us the 2 to 3 minute version of your background?
Yeah. So hi, everyone. It's good to be here. I am Jean Lederer, originally from Pittsburgh. I bleed black and gold, whether I like it or not. But I've been in New York City for almost 20 years, and I could feel the pull to New York since I was little. I remember when I was 5 years old, I'd be like, I'm moving to New York and I'm taking over the world. And honestly, my parents were like, she's probably going to do it. Like, there was no doubt in anybody's mind. And I'm pretty sure that's part of the reason why I ended up going to school to get a dance degree, because in my mind, I was like, that gives me the perfect excuse to move to New York. Because any other degree, maybe you could stay around Pittsburgh, maybe you go somewhere else. But I was like, if I get a dance degree, then that'll give me the perfect reason to go to New York. So that's what I did. And then I fantastically, beautifully, artfully self-sabotaged for several years in the dance world, and then ended up co-writing an album, co-writing an off-Broadway show. Like, I've been in the entertainment industry in a lot of different ways throughout my entire career. I think that we're going to end up talking about the skill of selling comedy tickets on the street at some point in this conversation. And I actually had that as a job back in 2008, way before I was interested in comedy at all. And while I was doing that, I ended up meeting somebody who ran a talent management company who didn't want to run it anymore. And I ended up taking over that role because this person, I stopped them on the street. They were like, first of all, I don't usually stop for anybody. And you seem really good at sales and like just really good at connecting with people. What's your background? So I end up going from the streets selling comedy tickets to running a talent management company for 5 years. Wow. And I describe that as like my master's degree in the business of show, and really understanding a lot of different pieces about it that I don't think I had the perspective on from the side of former. And then I ended up running workshops that brought me into speaking. I ended up selling that talent management company and going fully into coaching and speaking from there. And on the speaker circuit, my feedback was always, hey, your funny stuff is amazing. Funny stuff is where I click in. And, I like masochism. As a dancer, I was like, you know what? I miss that part of my life. And what's more masochistic than stand-up comedy? So I decided, why not give it a try? I think being a funny speaker is kind of a low bar. You know what I mean? Like it's great if you can be funny, but to make a conference room laugh is not the same as making a room full of New Yorkers in a comedy club laugh. And I wanted to see if I could hit that bar. And that happened in 2018. I started comedy, and doing comedy really influenced how I now coach people. So that's what kind of brought me into realizing the parallels of what it takes to be a good comedian and what it takes to be a good business owner, and then being able to create this comedian's formula that I now teach to help people apply what I know.
Wow. Well, we're definitely going to talk about the comedian's formula, and regular listeners know that I mention it often because I'm very proud of it and I love it. I do stand-up comedy too, and it's a weird gig. There's no doubt about it, and 100% correct. I am also a professional speaker, and I've always used humor in my training or my speaking. But there's a big difference between getting on a stage for a bunch of people who want to learn how to sell, in my case, and a room full of people who paid money to come and laugh. Now,
that's right.
My belief is they've paid the money, so they want to come and laugh, but we both live in New York, and they can be, let's say, a fickle audience. You better be on your game pretty quickly, otherwise they will let you know. And that's actually one of the things I love about stand-up. In sales, it can take a day, a week, months, or even years to close a deal. But in comedy, you're closing the deal every 10 or 15 seconds. And the audience is either buying it or they're not. And they're not shy about letting you know whether they're going to buy or not. They're either laughing or they're not. And you better get on it. Like me, I know you've worked for some very well-known companies. Who are some of the big companies you've worked with?
My very first speaking gig, like the first keynote I gave, was for the leadership team at Google. So that was a pretty cool way to start. And that talk incorporated a unicorn, rose quartz, and a troll doll, and they bought it hook, line, and sinker. I was like, I'm just going to lean all the way in with my storytelling and see if I can get them to buy in. And thank they did. I worked with Yale. I've worked with Diageo. I worked with Twitter right before the Muskrat took over, and I did not get my paycheck because of that. So, yeah, right, well, so he owes me.
Elon, if you're listening, please pay Jen.
Respond to one email, please. But everybody I was talking to got fired. So,
wow, that's why, Jen. Here's a tip: I always get paid in advance.
They refused. I tried to negotiate that, Jeff. They refused. It was they hit me with the 90-day net.
Comedy is a different story, but in my speaking career, you pay me in advance. My thing is, I'm not leaving my house unless your check has cleared my bank. I'll turn down the gig.
Here's the caveat to that. Then they hired me to do a comedy set. It was a half-hour comedy set that I was doing. So it was like that middle ground of I tried, I tried. So anyway, those are some of the companies I've worked with.
All right. I promise for those who are listening, we are going to get to storytelling and the comedian's formula, but there's something I have to ask, and because I know what this leads to, I can't wait to hear it. Can you tell us about the owl? Why is the owl important to you?
The owl is my origin story of everything that I'm doing these days. I went to an intuitive painting class back in February of 2018, the most millennial sentence ever. And I really didn't want to go, but something told me I should. And they gave the word curiosity. That was the only prompt that we had. And then we started painting. And I ended up painting this owl that I was like, okay, cool. That came out of me. And I signed my little J, my signature J, on the bottom corner of the painting. And as soon as I did, I heard the words, "Start Comedy Now." And, like I said, I had been speaking and I had been like toying with the idea for like 2 years when people would say, "Hey, what's next for Jen? What are you doing?" I was like, I'm getting into comedy. But, I was just like circling that idea for years. And I heard that message. And in that room where I painted that owl, I was given a 3-month residency. It was this like co-working, co-living space for international business owners. And it was like a perfect audience for me because these were the people that I was kind of talking to all the time anyway. And they gave me a 3-month residency the next month, March 2018. So we're actually like right in my 7-year anniversary right now of starting comedy. I started, and my first set was a 20-minute set in front of an audience that I filled the room with. And I really haven't looked back since.
Well, happy comedyversary.
Thank you.
So let's get to what everybody wants to hear about storytelling. How do you actually define storytelling?
Yeah, storytelling is happening all the time, no matter what. It's communication. I think it's the best form of communication. But I hear people tell me all the time, I'm not a storyteller. And yes, you are. You're either doing it on purpose or you're doing it subconsciously, but you're doing it. How you move through the world, the words that you choose, the things that you say, the things that you don't say, what you wear. It's all storytelling. And I think that there's three kind of characters in the story all the time. There is the storyteller, there's the story, and there's the audience. And sometimes it's very much about the storyteller, right? Like in comedy, the story and the storyteller are, really, really linked and important. In film, oftentimes the screenwriter is supposed to fade to the back. You can, see styling of, oh, that's definitely that director, that's definitely that that screenwriter, whatever, but the author oftentimes fades to the back. Same with a lot of books. And then there's the perspective of the audience, and every person's perspective can change, in their opinion, what that story was about, what the takeaway really was, who their opinion on the storyteller, all of those things. So those three pieces are moving all the time, and they change, but those are all things to consider in storytelling.
And why does storytelling sell? I mean, I'm asking a question which I certainly believe in it also, but why does storytelling sell?
It's a point of connection. It's people don't really like to be talked at. They certainly don't like to be told how to think. And so instead of just throwing facts at them, telling them, here's why this is important, stories allow them to, again, interact with their perspective on what it is you are saying. And then they can start seeing themselves in parts of the story, and they naturally start connecting. They naturally start leaning in and wanting to go deeper into, certain directions. And if you're listening, right, and you're kind of interacting in a way that's not just, I'm here to tell this story and I'm going to ignore everything that you're saying. Same with when we're doing comedy. If I have a certain set and I get in there and I realize I have not won them over, right? If I don't pivot, if I don't start like playing with different directions of how can I get you to be in this moment with me, I've lost them and I've not really done my job at all. It's the same with storytelling. You can kind of pick up cues on where somebody is leaning into your story and go more in that direction, or ask questions about the things that you're seeing them light up about. But the story is giving them space to also be present in what you're saying.
Yeah, it's great. In my conversational selling skills program, which is the sales process from start to finish, I talk about the importance of telling a particular type of story that I call a verbal truth story, which is a story about somebody else like you, Mr. or Ms. Prospect, who by doing business with me lived happily ever after. If I, as a salesperson, just say, you should do business with me because I'm great, well, people hear that through the filter of, yeah, but you're a salesperson trying to take my money. Even if I've done a good job of establishing rapport, there's still always that little thing. And the way that brain science works, as you probably know, is that when people are making a buying decision, they automatically think of the negative first. What if I do business with Goldberg and my sales don't increase? What if? And that's not good or bad or right or wrong. It's just the way the brain works to protect us from making bad decisions, because we don't want to do that. And when we tell a verbal truth story or a story about someone else who did business with us and it worked out well, the brain starts going, oh, I was worried this might not work out, but if it worked out for somebody else like me, maybe it'll work out for me too. So I could not be a bigger fan and agree with you completely. Storytelling is essential to sales. So here's the $1 million question. What is the comedian's formula?
It is like deceivingly simple. It's 3 steps. The first is meeting people where they are. And as I was just saying, in comedy, if I get on stage and I do not let the audience know I'm here with you, whether it's speaking to something that just happened in the room or, something that's going on current events wise, it's just something that lets them know I'm here with you. I didn't just come with this fully planned thing, even though, yes, of course, I came on stage with a set in mind, but there's still room for me to meet you where you are to make sure you're on board, because then we can have fun. If I just drive into my set and I've never picked them up, I can be landing every joke and it's not landing for them because I didn't do the simple thing of meeting them where they are. And in sales, really in any part of business, I find the advice of differentiate yourself, right out the gate is something that people are given a lot. And I disagree with that. I think you want to be as simple and direct as you can. When someone asks me, what do? I say I'm a comedian and a storytelling consultant, or a comedian and a keynote speaker, depending on who I'm talking to. You know enough about that world where you're like, okay, I'm picking up what she's putting down. I've heard people use titles that do not exist. Like the title that I'm like, I have no reference point for that. And the thing is, people don't admit when they're confused. So now you're having this conversation with someone and they're just like, oh, okay, they're pretending, right? Everyone's pretending. Now we're both dissociated. No one's really present in the conversation. And like, literally, what are we doing? Why are we here? So like, simplify it. Don't try and be so, impressive with making up words that nobody knows out of, people thinking that that's going to create curiosity. It doesn't. It creates confusion, and a confused mind says no. So like in the first sentence, you can lose somebody if you're trying to be too cute.
Yeah. So I'm an old guy in sales. I know a lot of old sales sayings, and one of them is, if you confuse them, you lose them.
Yeah. Great. Love that. Love when it can rhyme.
By the way, everybody's a comedian. Pete Ekstrom says, just started a new sales job last week and I got my first 2 orders. Get out and stay out. Thanks, Pete. Leave the comedy to the professionals, but okay. So how does your comedian's formula apply? I mean, you kind of just told us. When you're giving a speech or training a company, how do you teach them to apply that formula to sales on a daily basis?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's 2 other steps to the formula that we can get to, or we don't have to.
No, go ahead, please.
Okay, so the second step is...
I lose track easily.
That's all right. I'm here to keep us on track, Jeff.
Thanks, Jen.
The second step is 3 different categories that you always want to be thinking about. And in a comedian's world, like if we're given 5 minutes on stage, usually we have like 3 different topics that we'll hit that kind of explain our perspective, who we are. If you follow us, here's what you're going to get more of. And in this formula for people, when I teach it, I give you the 3 topics that I want you to think about, which is how do you do what you do? Why do you do what you do? And what's next in what you do? The thing about those questions is you can look at them from a million different perspectives, from your perspective, from the customer's perspective, from where they are before they work with you, where they are after they work with you. There's a lot of different ways that you can flip that. And I think as a comedian, that is the muscle that we are really good at. We can take one premise and our job is to flip it until we find the funniest perspective. I think what some people don't know about comedians is it's not always their perspective necessarily that you're hearing. It's the funniest perspective. I compare it a lot to litigation lawyers, right? It's not necessarily their perspective that they are fighting. It is the one that's going to win. It's the winning argument that they are choosing. Comedians do the same thing. In business, you're looking for the perspective that's going to connect, and you want to have different perspectives, different ways of flipping this, because every audience is different, right? And so if it's allowed to be a living, breathing conversation, not one that has been set in stone, then you can move in real time and choose different stories that highlight different perspectives that will connect to that person that you're talking to. And I think that's the biggest point that I'm driving home here is the art of connection matched with the art of curiosity, right? Really like being in the power of question versus the power of I have all the answers. Like that energy, people feel that energy of like, oh, we're here to explore this together. Again, you're not talking at me. We're having a conversation. I am an expert in a lot of things, but I don't know all the things. Right. And I'm going to be the first one to admit that in our conversation. And in fact, I'd love to hear the things that you know. Right. And the how, why, what's next are also great ways to frame the questions that you ask the person. Because really what we are trying to pull out of yourself, like when I'm working with somebody or when I'm trying to, like when you're talking in sales, when you're talking to somebody, you're wanting their perspective on, what their challenges are, why they think they're doomed to fail, why they think they should be winning, why they think they're the best in the industry, yet no one knows about them. Like, your perspective is what defines everything. And so when I'm pulling stories out of people, that's actually what I'm looking for. It doesn't, you can tell me a million different stories. I'm always looking what's happening underneath it, because that's the thing that's most consistent. You are who you are everywhere you go. And that's often defined by your perspective. The third piece of this, and then I'll wrap this up, is, in comedy, the temperature check is what you've talked about. It's laughter. It's immediate. You're either laughing or you're not. I either did it or I didn't. In this formula, it's about, did we connect, right? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Is there something here that's worth continuing to talk about? Are you understanding what I'm saying? Did I do a good job of speaking your language? Did I meet you where you are? Did I offer something that sparked more curiosity? And is there a reason to keep this conversation going? And so it's different than just, okay, so how should we move forward? Pushing the sale instead of driving towards the sale, which obviously you are, but you're driving toward connection. Because if you can connect, anything else can happen from there. The sale can happen from there. A referral can happen from there. A great review can happen from there. But without the connection, it's very, very difficult to move towards any of those other things.
Brilliant. I'm just nodding my head constantly because I'm agreeing with every word you're saying. I've been selling for 50 years, and a lot has changed in the world of sales over that time. But the one thing that I think has not changed is that people still do business with people they like and trust unless they have no other choice. And that means if you can't connect with your prospect and help them to connect with you, you're going to have a very difficult time. I happened to go on a sales call just yesterday. Really, I fell in love with this guy. The first hour and 15 minutes of the sales call was me, shaking his hand, saying, pleasure to meet you, and all that stuff. I said, I'm just curious, how'd you get into this business? My manufactures and sells closets, custom closets. An hour and 15-minute story, he told me, of everything that had happened to him, to the point where I'm almost like, wow, I'm almost sorry I asked. This is taking, normally this is like a 3-minute conversation. Actually, the average I get is about 7 minutes of CEOs and VPs of sales talking about themselves, their favorite subject. But I fell in love with this guy. I mean, I was like, I really like this guy. As he's talking about, I could go out for a beer. Well, I don't drink beer. I could go out for some shots of tequila with this guy, and I could hang with this guy. And the whole sales call took 2 hours. I asked him for a plant tour. We talked there. And normally the way I'll leave a first meeting is, I'm going to go back and think about everything we talked about. And I'm going to put some ideas on paper, and I'd like to come back and share those ideas with you next Tuesday at 3. And that way you'll have all the information you need to make an intelligent decision whenever you're ready. And usually people go, sounds great. Except as I was leaving his manufacturing facility yesterday, he goes, I'm really excited about this and can't wait to work together. It's like the connection was absolutely there. And I talked about this much and he talked this much, because you're absolutely right. It's not about what you say. It's really all about asking questions and listening. And that helps you to connect to people too. Brilliant. So how does storytelling help us solve problems?
Well, it's the curiosity piece again. It's really just, I call it the sandbox, when we're getting in the sandbox and we're here to build, knowing that most of it's going to get knocked down. Right? We're building and we're playing with different perspectives and angles. And it's just like, let me see what you would do with these tools. And what would you build with a shovel and a bucket and some water versus what would I do? And then whose sibling is going to come through and ruin all of it? And how are you going to react when that happens? And how am I going to react when that happens? It's all the things around the thing that we think is the thing. Like we think it's the castle that we're building that defines who you are, but it's how you go about doing it. It's how do you act when you get frustrated? How do you act when you win? All of these different, how do you act when you fail? All of these different things are, to me, again, what I'm looking for, because that will define how you are interacting with your problems, how you're seeing yourself, how you're seeing the challenge, how you're seeing the potential, because that defines everything. The story that we tell about ourselves, the story that we tell about the situation is way more powerful than the actual situation itself.
So I believe almost anybody can sell. I can teach anybody how to sell. I can't make everybody into a superstar, but I can teach anybody how to sell.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say, but I want to hear from you. Can anybody be a good storyteller? And more importantly, for those who aren't naturally great storytellers, I mean, some people it just flows. They're just great at telling stories. They suck you in, and you can't wait. It's like reading a great book. You can't wait to get to the next page.
Mm-hmm.
For those who aren't such a natural at storytelling, is there a formula to putting together a good story?
You have to start telling stories. That's it. You got to just start telling the story. And I am a huge proponent of the editor, the critic, is not allowed in the room when you start to tell the stories, because all you're wanting to do is find out what's there. And the first question you should ask, let's say you go away and you do this homework, right? And you're like, I'm going to come up with 10 different stories around how, why, what's next. What I would encourage you to do then is look at everything that's in front of you and say, what works about this? What do I see in all of these things that works about this? Because you want to be building that muscle of being a champion of yourself and looking for what is already here that you can build on versus I got to fix this. I got to do this first before I can take an action. You know, all of the ways that we talk ourselves out of the game before we're even playing. So yes, you are a storyteller, assuming you're not a mute. Right. And even then I would say you're a storyteller because our body language, again, all of those other things, we are telling stories all the time. But the people who become really good at it are the ones who observe themselves in the process, right? And we step back again, you know, this as a comedian, if you are not listening and watching yourself back, you are losing out on so much growth because there's things that are happening subconsciously that you do not see in yourself when you're actually doing it. The little tics that you have, the way that you hold your hand, the way that you don't know what to do when you don't have pockets, you know, like all of these things that happen to the human body when we're like forced into these moments where there's pressure, where we're nervous, the body will betray us, right? And so it's very interesting to put yourself in these situations where you do get a little nervous and you step back, and the muscle of not criticizing yourself first, right? The editing and the criticizing and like trimming things and fixing things can come later, but the being a champion and being like, all right, what works about this? It's the same thing in sales. When someone is saying no, cool. What works about this? What about this no can I validate for you? What if I make it perfect that you're saying no to me right now? What if it's always good? It's always usable, right? That to me is the most powerful muscle of becoming a good storyteller, because you're going to be more willing to use your voice, as they say, even when your voice shakes.
So what's the actual difference between, I've got the question in my mind. So some people speak, you know, they're telling a story, and like I said, you can't wait to hear the rest of it. It's like, please continue speaking. I'm loving every second of it. I don't want to miss a word. And then sometimes you listen to, sometimes I listen to stories and I'm like, shoot me. This person is boring the crap out of me. I can't stand another second. How do you avoid that second one? Because nobody wants to be boring. Certainly as comics, we don't want to be boring, but in sales, we don't want to be boring either. What's the difference between the two?
Okay. So here's the thing. There might be some people that don't think that person's boring. All right. So I'm just going to say that there. There might,
as far as I'm concerned, but okay, I'll give you that one.
Okay. But you have to remember that there's also the perspective of like different people listening to it. I hear you. You think some people are boring. Other people might not think that that person is boring. Other people might be like, I love a monotone voice. I love when it just stays one note the whole time. It's almost like meditative to listen to. Okay. So I think the person that is captivating is the person who's confident in like where they are and how they are delivering it. I think when it gets boring, when it feels like why can't I connect to this, is because that person is also not connected to it, right? They dissociated minutes ago. They maybe left their body before they even started talking. And so I think the person who is willing to stay present, right, with themselves, their voice, the story they're telling. And I think also when it's people who are just regurgitating their elevator pitch, right? You see their eyes gloss over before they dive into it. And you're like, oh my God, here we go. They're about to go into their robot voice, right? And it's like, how can you bring your human back into that moment and choose to do it a little bit differently? Again, as a comedian, you know this, we deliver the same set over and over and over again. And there are jokes where I know I'm like, I got to stop telling that joke for a while because I'm bored with it. And so there's just no way it's going to land. So you have to be engaged with what you're saying if you want anybody else to. I think that's the biggest. If you're feeling that boredom from someone, probably they are too, and they really wish they didn't have to be talking right now.
Yeah, you're speaking my language. I mean, I recently, I still like my set, but I was like, you know what? I'm doing the same stuff over and over, and it's working. It's great, but I'm not challenged.
Yep.
And I actually signed up for a comedy class, which I had taken before, just to force myself to write some new stuff, because I have on my calendar every Saturday morning, write comedy. Except when Saturday morning comes around, I never sit down and actually do it. So
I could never schedule it like that. Oh my God, my muse, my creative self I would be out every Saturday morning. I would be unavailable every Saturday morning.
That's what's happening,
Okay.
Which is why I signed up. But I love what you said about being present. I think when the speaker, when the storyteller is not involved in their own story and they're somewhere else, that they lose their audience too. I have a dear friend, and I love this. I'm not going to say his name because some people listening might know this guy. Love hanging out with him and his wife, except this guy cannot stand silence. And if there's a moment of silence, he's telling a story. And I can't tell you how many times, I'll just say his name is Bob, which it's not. He spells it backwards, of course. He's 5 minutes in and my mind is going, what? And I'll actually say to him, Bob, what the fuck are you talking about? And he'll go, I don't even know anymore, because he just can't. There's no presence. He's not present in his own story. His mind's just vomiting up words. Yep. So there's no connection there. And I personally have zero patience for that.
Yeah, he's over here using just a numbing mechanism, right? Of just talking so that he doesn't have to feel anything. And it's like, it's working, Bob. No one's feeling anything. So congrats, you're nailing it.
So what's the most important story we need to be aware of?
The story that we're telling ourselves. The story that you tell yourself about whatever's about to happen, about how you are at sales, about how none of the sales have been going the way that you wanted them to, and here's why, right? And here's how that's going to affect everything else from here on out. The story that we tell ourselves defines so much, like everything, right? It really has a strangle, like a really tight hold on how we move through the world. And it's more than just mindset, right? It is a recurring narrative that we buy into over and over and over again. I mean, we are literally telling ourselves stories all day long, not only about ourselves, but about the people around us. And if you think that that's not defining your day, I got news for you. It is a really powerful story that for most of us is also subconscious.
100%. I think we're on the same page. I call that head trash. We often give ourselves, we're telling ourselves a story that may very well not be true, but we've said it to ourselves so often that we believe it is true. We're in the beginning of March here. In about another month, and this happens every year at this time, I start getting calls from panicked salespeople, and the story is the conversation is always the same. Jeff, summer's coming. What am I going to do? And I always ask the same question. What do you mean? And they always say the same thing. I know the story I'm going to hear, but I have to let them tell it.
Yeah.
You can't sell during the summer. Everybody knows that. And then I ask them the question, which I also know the answer to. Why can't you sell during the summer? And they always say the same thing, because everybody's on vacation. Now,
Right.
that's the most ridiculous thing in the world. Everybody's not on vacation at the same time.
Right.
Nobody that I know takes the entire summer off. Maybe
What are we, European?
I was just going to say maybe Australians, yes.
God,
But
that would
yeah, I
be
dated
amazing.
an Australian girl once, and she couldn't believe that I only had 2 weeks vacation as opposed to her 10. At any
Right.
rate, but that idea that you can't sell during the summer, if you keep telling yourself that story, you're right. You can't sell during the summer. So
Mhm.
are we talking about positive or negative self-talk here? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's just like, what are you subscribing to? I think right now I'm hearing all kinds of story about the economy, right? And there's a lot of facts in those stories. There's a lot of things that you can point to prove to me that you're right. And I'm still selling a lot of shit. I'm still enrolling a lot of different people. So I don't know what the difference is between you and I, other than I expect to be the exception, right? I am going to write the story that I'm the exception to whatever's going on. Because you know what? Even the story where they say, during the Depression, there was 30% unemployment. That means that there was 70%. 70% of people weren't experiencing that. I'm going to stay focused on that 70% as much as I can and be curious about how I could shift into that side of the story, right? And then write the story of how I could be more helpful to that 30%. But yeah, to me, it's like you can find whatever facts you're looking for. You are the best salesperson to your own self, right? You can, if you think you're bad at sales, you've been selling yourself a story and being very effective at it. So like, what if you started to sell a different story?
Yeah. When I work with people on a coaching basis, I work on certainly skills and techniques and tips and tools and all that stuff. But 50% of it is mindset, because your mindset does affect how you sell. And your timing, not surprisingly, is impeccable, because this morning before this interview, I posted on LinkedIn about that exact subject. I said, look, there's a lot of uncertainty going on right now and a lot of chaos. Love Donald Trump and what he's doing? Terrific. Don't love Donald Trump and what he's doing? Also terrific. But what's the difference? It's not going to pay your mortgage. Get out there and sell something. There are people who right now, yes, there are some people who are too worried to do anything right now, but that's not everybody. Look for your prospect. You got to go find your prospect, because they're out there. They're waiting for you right now. Look, was 2008 my best year ever? Nope, but I had a good year.
Right.
And a lot of that is because people like yourself and me don't let the, gloom and doom all around. Nobody's going to make any money. Okay, maybe you're not, but I'm still going to do it, because I don't need everybody in the world to buy from me. I just need enough people, and they are out there. Now, sometimes, and this doesn't happen in my world, but I work with lots of different types of salespeople. When I take a first meeting, it's going to last about an hour to 2 hours. But sometimes in corporate sales, they're only going to give you 15 minutes for your capabilities deck. So what happens if there's no time for storytelling due to whatever their process is or whatever their other factors are affecting that? What do you do then?
First of all, kudos to you. An hour to 2 hours. I could never. So that's awesome. Good for you. But what we've been saying this whole time is, even when you don't feel like there's time for a story, your job then is to search for the story that's present, because there's always a story being told. So then if you're not the one necessarily telling the story, you are the one looking for. You are now the audience, and the person you're selling to is the storyteller. And so my job is to, as quickly as possible, figure out what story you're telling yourself about this moment. And then how can my structure, right? If I have to bring you through a structure, if I know that this person feels like there's an anxiety to them right now, right? And so how can I speak to that, either directly, right? Or just subconsciously be like, you know what, maybe if let me just frame what we're about to do. Hey, it's really great to be here with you. I'm not going to take up a lot of your time. I know you got a lot to get back to. And we actually have a really beautiful structure that I'm going to bring you through to help us do exactly that. Here's what you can expect. Are you good with that? Right? And just like allowing them to know, wow, this person just like spoke to exactly what I'm experiencing without me even having to say anything. You just built a lot of trust in that moment. So the better that we can become when you're a storyteller, you're also a really good listener. And so the more that you are able to listen to the cues that's being said and not being said, and speak to that, that story is the one that's driving the conversation. And the more that you can bring that to the consciousness of what's happening, the more you are in control, right, of the narrative. And the more that they are feeling validated, they're feeling seen, they're feeling held in certain ways. They're like, wow, I thought I was going to want to jump off this call, and now suddenly I want to hug you. Like there's ways that you can just validate the person, their experience, their resistance to the conversation, and be the one to drive that narrative confidently, right? And without apology.
Yeah, love that. When I prepare for these interviews, I always go to people's websites and I go to their LinkedIn feeds. And there was something that I caught on your website that I'm interested in. What are mock interviews all about?
Oh, yeah. I run these free mock interviews once a month. It's the last Wednesday of the month. And it's really a place for you to come practice talking about yourself, right? Because if you want to get better at talking about yourself, you have to talk about yourself. We nail it when we do it in our head. We're like, oh my God, how many beautiful points was that? Can't wait. And then someone says, so tell me about yourself. Radio silence. So I use my comedian's formula as a way to interview one or two people in these mock interviews. And during the interview, I'm kind of pulling back and explaining what I'm doing. What part of the formula are we in right now? Why is this starting to work? Where are you seeing the conversation go? Where else could we take it? So it's kind of a way of, number one, people being able to practice talking about themselves, but also for people to be able to better understand the actual application of this comedian's formula that I teach, and like all the different ways that you can use it to connect with people.
And is this on Zoom or is this in person?
It's Zoom.
And it's free?
It's free.
Well, I think I need to refer 8 gazillion people to you. One of besides being a trainer and a coach, I'm also a fractional or outsourced sales manager. And as such, I interview salespeople, to potentially hire them for my clients. And I'm consistently stunned by how bad salespeople interview. You would think they're selling their favorite product and they would actually know how to answer a question like, so tell me about yourself. I'm consistently stunned by how horrible they are at explaining who they are, what they're about, and giving me a flavor for them. It's astounding. So I'm going to have to get those over to you. You brought it up before, and I do want to ask about it. You posted a video, which I was watching this morning, about selling comedy tickets on the street. So what's the key to hawking or selling on the street?
Well, they actually call it barking, which is just the worst ever. But it's like getting excited for the no. Just going after as many no's as you can. That's the only way I've found to be able to have the momentum and the courage to keep going up to people on the street when like the last thing, especially New Yorkers, ever want to do is break their stride. They are walking at that pace for a reason, and how dare you, right? And then you're going to stop me to try and sell something? Like, come on. So just that playing a game of how many people can I get to say no is actually where I turn my focus during that, so that it becomes a win even when I'm getting rejected.
Love that. And I teach, learn to love no. Look, I don't love it as much as I love yes, but I always say, yes is my very favorite word in sales, but if yes is at eyebrow level, no is right below it. It's a millimeter below it, because in sales, nobody gets everyone. The guy I spoke with yesterday says he closes 100%. I said, then you don't need me. I need you. You need to teach me how to sell, because I'm an expert at this and I don't close everyone. Right. So, you have to know how many no's does it take to get to a yes. If you have a 40% closing ratio, 6 people are going to say no, 4 are going to say yes. It's just simple math. You quoted Adam Grant, who I adore, about a month ago, and you said, the future belongs to those who connect the dots. I found that interesting. Why does that speak to you?
Well, we've been talking a lot about perspective, right? And we are in the world of AI where it is not difficult to get the data, to get information, to get, the talking points about something, having the information is no longer the thing. It really hasn't been for a while. But the way that you synthesize that information, the way that you deliver it, the way that you see it, right? Your perspective on your industry is the thing that people really vibe with, right? That to me is a brand. A strong brand does not exist without a strong perspective. Every comedian that I love because of their perspective, right? That's the thing that I really tune into. When something happens in the world, there are certain people that I look to because I want their perspective on it. I don't want them to regurgitate to me what just happened. I know what just happened. I want your perspective on it. And so being able to have that skill of really knowing what is your perspective on this, and are you bold enough to share it? That is the thing that's really setting people apart, online, in person, the people, the influencers and everything like that. Like, everyone's out here just sharing their perspective on the hot topics, and the strong perspectives are the ones that cut through.
Yeah. And I'm incredibly impressed by people who are really, really good at connecting the dots.
Yeah.
I was following a self-help guru for quite a while. His name was James Arthur Ray. He just passed away. And I would sit in his audience, with 300 other people in a, big ballroom, and listen to him. And I go, how do you figure that out? I mean, one time he came up and just started talking about the movie, The Matrix. Mm-hmm. And everything he said was like, oh shit, I didn't see that. It's so clear when you say it, but it's the people it's almost like they see the matrix of life in a way that I often don't. I really respect that.
I give my dad a lot of credit for raising me with that, like, skill of observation, of just, he would constantly ask me, what did you notice about that room? Where was the exit? It was like he was training me for the CIA. He's like, what hat was the person wearing behind you? And they weren't wearing a hat. Those kinds of questions. And my dad was an electrician by trade. And he ended up writing a book about how Einstein's theory of relativity is actually inverted. And he put that together in his head through his study of electrical waves and dark matter, and like all of this stuff that I was like, what is happening? He was like, I have to get this out of my head. And so I helped him publish this book. But like that type of stuff, like the way that he connected those dots and like came up with this perspective himself was just like awesome to watch.
I actually trained my children to be observant like that. I'm a divorced dad, and my kids were very young when I got divorced. My older one was 4 and my twins were 3. And one of the things that I would tell them, do every time they would come over, I had them every other weekend. The first thing they would do is they'd run in the house, because I'd say, what's different? And there was always something, whether I, had something new or something, and they would run around the house being observant. And it's so much fun to point them in that direction. And my son, all 3 of my kids are very, very funny people, way funnier than me. My son knows that I'm a little bit anal. I'm not quite OCD, but I like things exactly in their place. I can tell you where everything is. And, if I would leave a room, I'd come back and a statue would be like an inch from where it was. And it's like, dude, did you do that to me? And he'd be laughing his ass off. But yet it's that paying attention that puts you in the place where you can connect the dots. And so many people just kind of wander through life with no real caring about what's really going on. I mean, today.
And even noticing what you notice tells you a lot about yourself, right? Like, you notice the little things. Okay, so Jeff's drug of choice is control. Like, cool. I'm learning that about you. But like, noticing what I notice about different things is actually very telling about my own perspective, what I'm seeing and how I see it. And a lot of people do not study themselves in that way,
Absolutely. Now, one of the things I'm very big on is networking. I get a third of my business from networking. I've been in one group for 20 years. And I read something that you said, you strongly suggest that when people are networking, they should take notes. And when I say strongly suggest, I'm paraphrasing a bit, because it was strong, because you said, if you don't take notes when networking, why do you hate yourself?
Yeah.
Which made me laugh. Tell me about taking notes and networking.
Oh, I mean, listen, the biggest lie we ever tell ourselves is, I'll remember that. Right? And so to me, it's just like, why do you hate yourself? You already don't really love to network. And so you're going to go do all this work, right? Put all this energy into meeting all these people for nothing. You're not going to remember what you talked about. You're not going to remember the different things that they said they might be interested in. You're not going to remember anything. And so you just took that energy, the two most precious things, your time and your energy that you cannot get back, and you just threw them away. You're like, I'm going to do this thing that I'm lukewarm about to begin with and just waste it and have nothing to be able to go back to. I don't know why you hate yourself like that. Just take notes and make it worthwhile.
Yes. And the same thing is true on a sales call. So here's the notes that I took when I first spoke to this gentleman on the phone, which I printed out and brought with me yesterday. And here's the page of notes I took in speaking with him yesterday, because I will absolutely not remember most of it.
Right.
I often say that, I have to check my driver's license in the morning just to remember my own name, because I'm ancient and I smoked way too much pot in the 60s and last night. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, taking notes is essential. Now, in one of the comedy classes I took, one of the things the instructors were very big on was, we're going to help you find your voice. But you say we don't need to find our voice. Can you explain that?
Listen, do you not have one? Have you not spoken a word ever? You have a voice. You got to use it, right? And the reason I don't like the word find is because then people are given the excuse, oh, I have to go do this thing before I start using, before I start actually being seen, before I start using my voice, I have to find it. And that might take years, could be decades. Same with passion. Don't get me started. You don't have to find your passion, right? You're a passionate human being. Engage in life, go. The things that light you up, do more of that. Hello, you're passionate. With your voice, I think what they mean is you got to find your perspective, right? You have to find your point of view, but that's different than your voice. You have a voice, and the more that you use it, step back, observe it, and say, okay, what worked about this? Where am I seeing myself light up? What are the different parts what is happening, right? When I first started comedy, everything, I was very aggressive, right? I would get on stage and be like attacking the moment. And I was like, what is happening there? And it's not that wasn't me. That was me in that moment. That was how I was coping with nerves. That's how I was like doing my best in that moment. I can't say that wasn't me. That was me in that moment. And the more that I got on stage, the more I could relax, the more that shell started falling away. Okay, you might say that was me finding my voice, but that was my voice the whole time. And it's just the more that I used it, the more that I felt comfortable really bringing my whole self to that moment. And then I could really start having my own point of view, right? My own perspective on the things, because I was bringing my whole self to the stage. And I think that's true in business and in life. You just have to, you got to engage with it. You got to engage with yourself. Stop, like, you don't have to find anything. You got to use all of it.
Yeah. To me, it's more about who am I really? And I gave it a lot of thought because of this class that I was signing up for. And look, I enjoy my comedy. I love performing it. I get laughs. It's heavenly. But I haven't really created a persona, not created a persona. I don't think I've really allowed my true self to come through in everything I say, because, and I'm a guy who hates almost everything, has no patience for anything, and walks through life going, really? All day long is really? And actually, I decided, if Netflix ever smiles down on me, my first special is going to be called Really? Because that's how I was. And that's what I'm looking to do in this class. You just come up with my take on really? Because so much of the world amazes me. It's stunning.
Oh, well, that worked very well for Jerry Seinfeld.
Yes, exactly right. Well, we could talk about comedy all day long. And by the way, when you said, when something happens in the world, I look to Anthony Jeselnik.
Okay.
I just love how dark he is. And I love how you just never see the punchline coming in. He doesn't give a fuck. There's no such thing as too soon for Anthony Jeselnik.
He's going to take you on a ride, but he also is skillful in doing it.
Oh, brilliant,
Mhm.
an amazing writer. I'm incredibly impressed.
Right.
I can't resist asking about this. What's the story with red lipstick, and what's it got to do with women's empowerment?
I wore it for you.
Uh,
Okay, so in World War II, it became mandatory for women who enrolled in the army to wear red lipstick. And that's because Hitler hated red lipstick. Now, I have a theory that it's because he wanted to be wearing it. Okay. So we could just let that sit there. That's my theory on him.
Talk about painting a picture. Boy, oh boy, I just got a picture there.
Okay. So, put lipstick on a pig. And so it became synonymous with being victorious. And Elizabeth Arden at that time, because capitalism is going to capitalize, came out with a red lipstick called Victory Red. And so from that moment on, just the energy of wearing red lipstick was intrinsically linked with being confident, being victorious. And I mean, I truly, anytime I put it on, I'm like, unstoppable. Try me.
I love
And
that.
this is genderless, everybody. I recommend you just try it.
I love that. And I believe that now every time I see one of those videos of Hitler giving a speech and he's screaming, I'm now going to see him with red lipstick on it. Changes it completely.
It really does.
I also saw that you posted about a year ago that your word for 2024 was unfuckwithable, which I really liked. Do you have a word for 2025?
I do. It's refinement. It's less fun than last year's word. But one of my big skills in life has been my ability to pivot and do huge pivots and take what works and then go a totally different direction. And this year I've decided that the muscle of commitment and really staying in my lane and staying in the direction that I've been going is the most important thing for me to do. And so I'm allowed to pivot a little bit. I'm allowed to refine and kind of trim the fat, as we say in comedy, but mostly staying the course. One of the acting coaches that I used to have my actors go work with when I was a talent manager would always say boundaries are the springboard to creativity. And I'm really finding that with giving myself these rules of, okay, you can make some shifts, but nothing big, has really forced me into a different kind of creativity with approaching my life and my business that I'm enjoying so far this year.
That's great. Jen, I'm going to share my screen. If somebody wants to attend your mock interviews or maybe work with you or hire you to give a talk, or I know you also do consulting, please tell everybody how they can reach you.
Yeah, everything is my name. Jen@JenLederer.com is my email, JenLederer.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on any of the socials with my name. If you go to my website, there's a mock interviews page where you can get the dates and the time and everything for the next one. You can sign up for my newsletter. All that stuff is there.
Okay. And people watching us live can see that. But for those who may be hearing this on a podcast in a couple of weeks, you want to give it spell that? Is there a phone number you want to give out?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And here's my social. It's JENN LEDERER.com.
Got it. Well, Jen, thank you so much for sharing your brilliance so generously. You are delicious and funny as heck. And I will end as I always do, gang. Please remember that sales is a game of making things happen. Get out there and make sales happen. Have a great weekend, everybody. Have a great weekend, Jen. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff. Bye.